Today we have our second session. AI. This is an initiative from Makers Fellowship where we bring amazing people just like Juan Diego, where they will share where they share the experience in AI. Today, as you can see in the presentation, we'll be talking about AI and ethics with Juan Diego. So Juan Diego, thanks a lot for accepting the invitation. Thanks a lot for being here today. And well, the scenario is all yours.
All right, so thank you so much to the Makers Fellowship for inviting me over to talk about how to transpose ethics into law, and especially in the field of AI, and how like this field is being modified and changed in international law and in national law. So first, I'm gonna start off with some general definitions on AI and how it has been, why is it a topic that must be regulated, because generally this is supposed to be a very broad presentation, so I will not touch on very specific things, as technical requirements would only intrude in the learning of how ethics work in AI, and it's a very general overview of how ethics work. There's very particular papers that talk about specific ethics and specific ethical approaches towards the regulation of AI. So as an overview, artificial intelligence was defined by John McCarthy as the science and engineering of making intelligent machines, especially intelligent computer programs, and it is related to the similar task of using computers to understand human intelligence, but AI does not have to confine itself to the methods that are biologically observable. In this sense, AI can work unmaterialized in a way that humans cannot. All human intelligence is materialized, and it depends on certain functionalities of the body and the organs, while AI can work dematerialized in many ways, such as cloud computing and other technologies that work with it towards producing these artificial intelligence. For instance, Cerebras, which is a company which produces AI, house 2 cloud servers, which combined together produced their version of the advanced artificial intelligence they are developing. So the first test to define whether AI thinks, which is the main question, was Alan Turing's test, which was a series of questions that somebody did to an artificial intelligence, or the first artificial intelligences, as Alan Turing was the father of artificial intelligence. And he had to distinguish between which one was a human text and which one was machine text. So though this test is highly questionable, and now scientific community is questioning whether this test is valid anymore, the underlying basis of thinking whether a machine can think or not is the essence of what philosophers have developed towards the ethics of AI, and how we should treat AI for once, and how we should regulate it and regulate its conduct regarding how we think of ourselves as humans and the human-machine interaction. So essentially, there are two types.
Juan Diego,
yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you. Would you mind switching to presenter mode?
Am I not in presenter mode?
So we're seeing the split screen. So you might be able to switch it clicking on the top.
Yeah. Sorry. There we are.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So there's two main branches of AI. So there's strong AI and weak AI. Weak is considered as narrow AI. Narrow AI is the AI that surrounds us daily. So ChatGPT and all of these applications, such as Watson or other AI, is what we have as narrow AI. But it is not weak as in the sense that it cannot do many things. Rather, it's weak in that it performs a single task, and in that single task, it is very proficient. So in this sense, strong AI is not yet here, and is not yet until, experts such as Mo Godot, who developed AI for Google X, says that super artificial intelligence or general artificial intelligence, which is considered the strong AI, will not arrive until 2027, but Elon Musk has said that in 2 years we will have AI here. So the essential thing about general artificial intelligence is that it has consciousness, that it is self-aware, and it can solve problems, learn, and plan for the future, which is something that AI now cannot do. And then there has been a lot of breakthrough in this field, and they are using a system of simulating sleep for AI in deep learning, allowing it to recover memory functions that humans have. So it's replicating the memory functions of humans. So we are actually not that far away from achieving this singularity that is what it's called, the idea of strong AI. So the other side is machine learning versus deep learning. Machine learning is considered the human intervention in how AI learns, and that was the first way people did it. So whenever you click on the image and you say, I'm not a robot, and click on the things they are asking you to click, such as buses, you're actually helping AI to identify buses. So like with that set of data, an AI is being trained to identify buses and understand that those are buses and that it must not collide, for instance, in self-autonomous driving. And that's like the basic model. In deep learning, it is highly scalable and refers to neural networks, which are comprised by more than 3 layers. So there's an input layer where you input the database. There's multiple hidden layers where we don't know what happens. And then there's an output layer, which gives you the answer. So we evaluate precision and accuracy between the input layer and the output layer to understand whether an AI is working proficiently or not, but we do not know what happens in between. Well, not all neural networks are like this, but they are hidden layers where you don't know exactly what's going on. So there is the black box algorithms, which is what I just like tried to explain. But the problem essentially is that you do not know what happens within the processing of the information and how it's arriving to the solution of the problem. While previous machine learning was explicable and you could know exactly how the process of the learning of the algorithm worked, now we do not have that level of transparency because black box algorithms are much more efficient at performing tasks than those trained by human hands. In this sense, there's no going back, in the sense that black box algorithms are here to stay and they are much more efficient and the trade-off is great, but we are losing explicability and there's a high level of opacity on how they work. Sorry if any of this sounds very technical. I'm open to questions at the end of the presentation, but I cannot stop because of the system. So Mogadad, who was like the head of Google X at Google, says that there's 3 things that will happen inevitably, like the 3 inevitabilities. So he says that first, AI will happen. So AI will be developed and super AGI, like general artificial intelligence, will be developed. And the second inevitability is that it will eventually be smarter than us. ChatGPT, in actuality, has the same level of intelligence as Einstein, and the GPT-5, which is like in testing, is supposed to be more intelligent than the most intelligent human. And finally, the third inevitability is that something will go wrong, just because, well, there's multiple reasons, but in entropy law, the entropy law in science says that chaos tends to find its way, and in this sense, in AI, something will happen to be chaotic, or like that the universe tends to chaos, and in AI, the rule applies, and something will go wrong. So the idea is that this is not something that I am saying, but this person who is like a high expert on AI, and the idea is that we're facing an Oppenheimer moment. So Martin Heidegger, who is a philosopher, said that the essence of technology is not technology itself. So he refers in this treatise of philosophy that the essence of technology is how humans instrumentalize technology to achieve certain objectives. So that could be political objectives, that could be progress objectives, that could be social objectives in different ways. But that humans have to be conscious that it's not the technology itself, but rather how we use the technology that triggers certain things. So as you know, there's this very famous movie going on about Oppenheimer and about Robert J. Oppenheimer, and how he developed the nuclear weapon, and how in the Project Alamo, there's like all of these ethical conundrums on how reckoning the benefit of nuclear energy, for instance, and reckoning the destroying power that could represent the nuclear energy itself. So the idea is that Oppenheimer realizes that he has created this thing that could be very beneficial for all of us, while creating at the same time an existential threat to humanity. And in this sense, the Oppenheimer moment of AI refers to the moment that technological companies, developers, and designers and deployers face the same ethical problems that Oppenheimer faced at his time with the atomic bomb. So the existential risk refers to this idea that human existence is a threat, and all of the AI experts say that AI is the single most highest existential risk. They have categorized it on top of climate change, which is like a good second, and it's close. So what they say is that the existential threat of AI is fundamented on the idea that we would face a catastrophic risk in any scenario where AI aligned itself with some ethics that we did not program it for, or that it learned to do like through other processes which we cannot see because of the opacity of the black box. So the idea is that several people from different fields, such as like Yuval Noah Harari, who is like a historian, says that in a historical, technological, social, psychological insights of how humanity has evolved and how technology has evolved throughout time, we have never faced something like AI, because as, for instance, we face an existential threat from nuclear bombs. Nuclear bombs do not have the capacity of making themselves more intelligent, while AI has the capacity of improving itself continuously and exponentially. So the alignment problem arises, and here I would like to first establish something. There's this great philosopher from Oxford whose name is Nick Bostrom. I do not agree with all of his ideas, but he has this idea of how he has a fable on an owl who, which name is Strongflinkle or something like this. He's Swedish. And he establishes that a set of sparrows want to have an owl to do all of their chores for them. And so they go looking for an owl egg to then breed the egg and basically take advantage of the owl, who would clean their nests and like who would hunt for them at night and would allow them to live much easier lives and take advantage of the owl. And then when they harvest the owl or the owl egg, the owl turns out to be this horrendous thing, which basically destroys the whole society of sparrows or squirrels. I can't remember the exact bird it was. So the same idea applies to AI, thinking that AI will make everything easier and that we use ChatGPT generally and we use everything in the common day, but eventually it could come back to kill us and to destroy basically the soul fabric of society. So here, the question of which ethics will it align with matters. So Alex McAxill, which is another philosopher, I'm not sure if he's from Oxford or Cambridge, he vouches for utilitarianism and long-termism. So the idea of utilitarianism is that the action that should be taken in ethics should be the one that seeks the most amount of happiness for the most amount of people. And in long-termism, he vouches for the idea of long-term utilitarianism, which means that we should only be concerned with the problems that face us in the long term, rather than in the contingent or immediate ones. So, for instance, he says that poverty is a contingent problem, so AI should take precedent over poverty, for instance, in the problems that we should be concerned with. So he actually there's lots of critiques on them as like philosophers and as people, and I don't necessarily agree with all of it, but I do think that existential risk and urgent risk of AI manages to take precedent over other risks that might be mitigated through time. So in this term, I do believe in some parts the long-termism theory, and there's also this other side of intersubjectivism, which is what I also believe in. So I believe that the common values, essentially in ethics, we have to determine which values are we gonna align with and what we value over what. So what I believe is that intersubjectivism is the way, which means that between two subjects, they should discuss and come to agreements or common grounds where they agree to common values, and those values are the social ones that will be defended. So there's different sorts of intersubjectivism, but essentially this is a Heideggerian proposal and a phenomenological proposal, because we do not see everything in the same view and the same way, and we interpret things in different ways, and we interpret values in different ways. So that's why I think intersubjectivism is necessary. And it is a common trend in the technological philosophy sector. So I think that it could work. Then there's also virtue ethics and the possibility of Aristotelian ethics, which means that in a normative philosophical way, we should approach our actions in the way living a moral life that produces virtuous habits. So in this sense, my big problem with virtue ethics is that what is virtuous is not always necessarily clear. And in that sense, we don't know exactly what to do. But at least if we take virtue as the way we have regulated life and that we have established some things that are clearly wrong, then at least don't do the wrong things. So now I'm going to talk about specifically this idea of ethics for done. So done is do anything now, and is the way people have prompted ChatGPT to allow it to jailbreak its limits and the limits set by the developers of OpenAI, and engage in unethical activity. And this jailbreaking of the AI could go from grabbing some codes to access some Microsoft Office programs to planning a Molotov bomb or planning even an atomic bomb. So like my problem is that the level of unethical behavior that you can have within an AI is unlimited or limited to the capacity of the AI if you jailbreak it. So this is why I think it's so dangerous if we do not have clear ethical parameters with which you allow. If you want, I can explain this later on, but it's too long to explain the done thing, but you can look it online. Then this is how I propose to transpose it into law. So the idea is that ethics are a set of values or behaviors that human action should aim for, even if it fails in the actual doing of so. And then there's AI ethics, that is how AI should be aligned and which ethics should AI align itself to, given a set of values that we have agreed upon. And then in the AI law, essentially, there should be a wide range of philosophical or of legal solutions and philosophical thought of those solutions and why to regulate them. But the essential topic still resides of how law normatively regulates AI and those who develop AI. So in essence, I'm gonna approach the idea of what is justice. And so DeepMind has done an experiment on the veil of ignorance. And so John Rawls, who is a legal philosopher, thinks that has this idea of the veil of ignorance, which is the idea that behind a curtain of ignorance that prevents us from knowing what are the outcomes and who we are empathizing with in reality, such as familiarity or friendship, for instance, we should judge situations and how do we think society should function. So the way they did was a game where resources were more scarce for certain players than others. And before the game was deployed, they made the participants choose an AI model which would benefit those players with less resources or would benefit all players equally. So essentially what they arrived to is that players behind the veil of ignorance, before knowing whether they were assigned the position of high resources or low resources or scarce resources, they would choose the solution that would help the weaker ones more than the ones that were strong, instead of helping all of them equally, granting more advantage to the stronger players. And after they played, they asked them if they would choose they would choose this way again. And the strong players, those who had less help from the AI, said that they would choose it in the same way again. So this shows that the theory of justice prevails behind the veil of ignorance, though it is only a data point and it must continue to be like replenished, and the experiment must be reproduced many times to arrive to a certain conclusion. So, but it is a proposal of what would be justice of AI, and it's certainly interesting. So this is the proposal I'm working on. So I'm working on the idea of proposing a way of digitalizing or having digital fundamental rights. And this includes classical rights which existed before AI and new rights that are arriving with AI. So new rights are theoretical rights which do not exist yet, but or exist in a small manner or small form. So classic rights such as data protection with the GDPR and legislations alike such as the CCPA in the US, or our own Latin American data protection laws, which emulate many times the European law, will adapt themselves because data sets are essentially what is important in AI. New models are being trained by new AIs, but data sets are being chosen by humans. So if we have a biased data set that could arrive to terrible conclusions, so data protection rights essentially allow people to know how their data is being processed, especially personal data, which is being used, and in that sense, limit the amount of data that AI can grab about us and manipulate us on our daily decision making. Then there should be an evolution of the right of human dignity, as humans should not be replaced by AI. Essentially, that's like our dignity in the face of AI. And then there should be a slavery prohibition that should evolve to prohibition of slavery by machine. So the idea is that this is a real example. A couple of months ago, ChatGPT was asked to tag certain items and make a list of prices. But when accessing the web pages, it faced the "I'm not a robot" pop-up, and it couldn't solve it. So it went into Fiverr and paid a guy to go into the system and click on the "I'm not a robot" images. And then the guy asked, "But are you a robot?" And ChatGPT said, "No, I'm not a robot. I'm visually impaired. So I need you to help me to access this." So it actually lied about being a robot. And what's interesting is that essentially reproduced many times could make us live in a simulated reality where ChatGPT pays us money, fictional money, and we're essentially enslaved by a machine. So that's one possibility. Then there's the other part that is a recent decision. So the idea is that this in Spanish is called motivación, and the idea of a recent decision is that the decision taken by an AI should be explicable, and in that sense, the AI should say, "I took this decision this way." Because, for instance, Amazon started using AI to fire people. Oh, sorry. And the way Amazon fired people was without a human intervention, and then when it had to decide how it fired, it chose very random parameters, and people had no way to ask for an explicability of how it chose the parameters to fire them. So, and finally, the right to safety and security in face of the existential threat of AI and the chance of AI invading our daily life and making a simulation for us. And then regarding new rights, I think that there's a right to human oversight, which means that there should be always a human in the loop of how we interact with AI. So this is actually very interesting because this right exists in the GDPR. So whenever you have automated data processing, the GDPR requires a human interventor to realize, to oversight how the automatic processing is happening. So it is farther, like it goes farther, but like essentially you should have the chance that whenever there's an automated decision making in whatever field, for instance, firing, a laboral field, or like in your judicial field, when judges are aided by AI, you should have the chance that a human revises what the AI is doing. And for that, we need more transparency over how the AI is processing stuff, which means that black box algorithms are problematic in this right. And then there should be the right to know that you're interacting with an AI. Google released in their Google Assistant a possibility that it can call for you to the pizza place, and the pizza guy cannot know exactly if it is an AI or a human. So I think that essentially, that's like a minor example, but essentially like in multiverses or in digital form, you're not necessarily, you would know you're interacting with AI, and you could lose a lot of time not knowing exactly what that interaction means, and it could dehumanize the interaction you could have if you are falsely represented that you are interacting with a human. And finally, I think that there should be a right to disconnect from digitality. This comes from the idea that we have secluded communities who live in voluntary isolation, or indigenous communities who live in, it's called non-contacted communities, which means that essentially you should also have the right to not be connected digitally, or like AI should not be able to process your data and digitalize your identity or basically personal rights if you did not agree to it, or if you do not belong to digitality, especially for those who don't participate into this, not to suffer the consequences. So for instance, indigenous communities who are generally disconnected, especially the ones who live in involuntary isolation, should also have the right to live in voluntary isolation from AI if they do not want that way. And Amish communities, the same thing. So finally, the regulation options are basically international regulation, which could be international regulation that keeps a existential risk from, for instance, nuclear weapons is an example. So there's the International Atomic Energy Agency, but it could also have other options of regulating. So I'll show that later. There could also be national regulation, which is what's happening today in Peru, for instance. And then there could be self-regulation. So in the US, companies say that they are self-regulating to avoid catastrophic risk. And that's what people in the field generally say. But the leading AI voices in the US are calling for regulation. For instance, Elon Musk and Sam Altman, in their when they went to the hearing in Congress, they said that it is the most dangerous technology. And so this is the example. So this is communitary law and national law. So the European Union is working on the AI Act, or has passed the AI Act. They are still missing a final step for it to become regulation, but it mitigates the risk of AI depending on how risky the AI is. I don't agree with the way the EU is doing this, because, for instance, ChatGPT seems to be in the low risk regulation. It falls within the category of low risk. And after what I have told you today, it could be a very high risk depending on the context and how it's being used and what instrumental objectives it has to achieve its objective. So there's state regulation. For instance, Peru has approved a month ago a regulation on how AI is to be deployed, developed, and researched. Wait, sorry. One second, sorry. I cannot do it full screen again. I'm really sorry. One second. Okay, sorry. So, and finally, the big problem is that there could be incompatible legislation, which means that AI works in a borderless manner, meaning that it works through the internet most of the time. And in that sense, ChatGPT could comply with certain legislation, but not with other legislation. And that way, it could maybe not comply with the EU legislation. This is, for instance, what happens with data protection regulation. If the EU does not give the adequacy level to a country, that country cannot process data of the European Union. So in this sense, how this solution of state regulation or only regional communitary law it might not seem sufficient in the context that it is a humanity problem and a problem of the commons, meaning that it is a problem that supersedes the national capacity and the sovereignty capacity. So what I vouch for would be maybe more an international law system, but that has a high participation from individuals. So in international law, you have judicial organizations such as the ICJ, which is the International Court of Justice, or the ICC, which is the International Criminal Court, which have jurisdiction over certain treaties that guarantee rights to states or persons and judge states and individuals on the basis of their own international treaties. So for instance, there could be an international treaty regarding rights of AI, there could be an international treaty on the development of AI, and there could be an international treaty on the technical aspects of AI. So the one on the technical aspects of AI would seem more like CERN or the international, or the IAEA, which is the International Atomic Control Organization, basically, which could regulate the technical aspects and the uncertain scientific instruments which could be used, such as for the nuclear energy. And these regulations could avoid the catastrophic consequences of nuclear technologies, or in this case, AI technologies. There could be state-centered international organizations which tend to be more politicized, such as the UN or the OAS, which is the American states. There's like tons of examples which could happen there. But these treaties could be more in the sense of human rights violations, such as biases in the AI, where AI treats certain populations differently, or specific human rights violations, and those could be taken to judicial organizations. So under all of these questions, the question of digital constitutionalism resides. So there's this proposal of Dr. Eduardo Celeste, who is the person who I'm working with at the DCU Center of Law and Technology. And the essential proposal of digital constitutionalism is that it shares the foundational values and overall aims of contemporary constitutionalism, which is to protect fundamental rights, but focuses on the specific context of the context that is affected by the advent of digital technology. So this includes not only digital technology in the sense of internet and cyberspace, but also AI. And in that sense, digital constitutionalism seems to be a possibility towards an idea of global constitutionalism, which is an intersection between the national law and the international law systems. He does not propose it like that. He actually says that the advantage of thinking of digital constitutionalism as an ideology, and therefore a purely theoretical concept, lies in the possibility of distinguishing it from its implementation, its translation into reality. So this is his focus, and I agree with him that maybe we should not close digital constitutionalism to a certain characteristic, but it could be an interesting proposal that we could have a middle ground between international law and national law through a global constitutionalism, which is a proposal that is not new. It's proposed by Professor Taubner many years ago. So there are some people who are skeptics, and they say that that AI should not be regulated, or generally cyberspace law should not be regulated. So Lipsig and Easterbrook in 2015 think that regulating cyberspace or AI is like inventing the law of the horse. It is as ridiculous as having a specific law for the horse when the horse is well within the realms of property rights and animal rights. And then, well, now in Ecuador, for instance, nature rights could also endorse a horse. So, for instance, the argument they have is that is a minimalist argument, so that the law system should be minimalist and that it should only be developed through the existing regulation and through judges who do jurisprudence, and in that way they set the regulation towards the future. So this is possible in common law systems because judges evolve with the law, so they basically set precedents where there is no law. But in more civil law systems, where we have to pass codes and laws that are more strict and that are more constrained to written law and congressional law and like parliamentary law, that sets limits and precedents, it's highly contentious and it's hard. So I do believe that there could be a space for a new type of law there. And then in my final remarks, I what I want to transmit to you essentially is that when transposing ethics into law, we first should focus on arriving to a shared community or social values which are intersubjectively agreed upon to ensure the digital fundamental rights that AI should respect, and in choosing the regulatory system that ensures that developers, deployers, and companies, because AI is a fantastic force, so we should ensure that the benefits of AI are guaranteed while minimizing the risks of it and ensuring that it does not become a catastrophic risk. Thank you so much. I would like to open myself to questions. I don't know if the Makers Fellowship have anything to aggregate or say.
Overall, no. First, thanks a lot for your time, for sharing your knowledge, Juan Diego. But I don't know if anyone that is here, does anyone has any question for Juan Diego? You can just raise your hand, you can just leave it on the chat, but does anyone has any question?
I have a question. So with the pace that AI is having on its development, what's the timeline you see for regulating AI? My question basically goes to, will it progress much faster than the law to regulate it? Or do you have any insights on how to keep up with the pace of its development?
So I think that there's a series of problems there. One is that there is international law is a very voluntary law because states must sign treaties. So there must be international political will to set a law to abide by it. And I don't think that in the international sphere, there's enough people in the states that want this regulation to pass, especially since certain actors want to develop it before other actors. And it is essentially a race to develop the best AI model. And that's what is cataclysmic about the way we're developing AI. But the competition landscape makes it really hard to keep up with the companies and how they are developing it. And second, every country doesn't want to over-regulate it because if you over-regulate something, then that means that that something, whatever it is, will work slower as regulation, as they must ensure that they comply with the regulation before continuing the development. So I'm hopeful that within 1 to 2 years, we have some regulation. In the EU, I'm sure that within this year, we will have the AI Act. And the EU has this phenomenon called the Brussels effect, where they have the regulatory power to impose their digital norms to other countries. But that's not really good because the other countries not necessarily comply with the rules. Like, for instance, I think that Ecuador must comply very weakly with the GDPR standards, as the EU does comply very hardly with their standards. So I don't think that exporting the law is a very good system in general terms, but essentially what I feel is that it's hard to keep up, but I feel that at this point it is a necessity, and I feel that as a society we should all be worried that that this is actually the highest existential threat we have, and press our governments and have civil actions and have activism towards the regulation. Not activism in the sense of necessarily like pushing an agenda, but pushing towards the regulation of it in general terms. Then how that regulation will look is a matter of how we decide those ethics should look like. Sorry for the very long answer, but yeah, that's what I feel.
Amazing. Thank you. I think, Nico, you have a question.
Yeah, so thank you so much for the amazing talk, Juan Diego. As somebody interested also in policymaking, this is very insightful. Well, so I do have to know that I came up a little bit late, like at 7:30 because of some previous commitments. But I wanted to ask a question about some news that I heard about like a month or 2 months ago, in which we had like significant figures within the AI industry, like Sam Altman, I think it was like even Elon Musk, like advocating for a pause in the development of AI and I mean, that was like a long time ago, so I don't really know the exact news. Probably you heard about that, but like, do you think like while policymakers are figuring out like how to best regulate AI so we can like maximize the benefits that you said, like it like will that process like how can we make sure that that process like doesn't like inhibit like the development of AI on a safe way? I don't know if that makes sense.
Yes, so I agree with you. Like, I do think that, like, okay, first of all, the point you were making was like a very modest point, because what they asked was for 6 months of stopping the development of AI so we can focus on regulating it. And like, I agree, maybe like, I agree that from a regulatory perspective, it's not a long time and it could make sense. But essentially what I feel is that the race on who gets first to the superintelligence and the singularity is so big that countries, and especially the developers in companies, will not comply with it. And if it was like, for instance, even if we arrived to a place where the major powers agreed to stop the development of AI, I'm sure that certain countries which have lenient legislations or more lenient legislations would not stop the development. So, for instance, I'm going to put the example of the Delaware effect, which in which like companies go to Delaware, for instance, because of the low taxes that they put on companies. So in the same way, the country that decides to unregulate it amongst all of the countries is the one that is going to attract the most amount of companies to develop it there. So essentially, the problem is that the race to the bottom mentality and it's basically game theory, where like the prisoner's dilemma, where you don't know if the other prisoner is going to tell on you or you are going to tell on the other prisoner, makes the situation impossible and makes the possibility of a win-win situation not feasible. So the way AI development is working is very sum zero, or like the thought behind how AI is being developed is very sum zero. And in that sense, I don't see a possibility. Like, this is why Morgadat says that it's inevitable that the superintelligence is going to happen, because we could stop working on superintelligence today, but that does not mean that other people are not going to work on it. And especially like his main fears, for instance, international criminal groups, which have lots of money, such as, for instance, narco-traffic, could go into the superintelligence race if we all stopped to develop it. So the question is whether, like, so his question is, what ethics should we portray for AI to emulate? So the main researchers on this topic say that AI, for the first part of its development, is going to emulate the first data sets that it has, or the first human replicas that it learns from. But later on, it will have enough places that it will discover new places where it has to choose individually without an example that it has before on how to choose. So the question is also how it's going to choose and how those instrumental objectives are going to happen. So the problem is not the final objective, because we can usually put the input and train it to narrow objectives and tell it these are the objectives. But for instance, there's like this thought of Nick Bostrom, actually, I think so, or I'm not sure if it's there or on the alignment problem. On one of the two books, they mentioned that AI could be set the objective of making a calculation so big that it needed the whole human population, and basically it enslaved us all to basically develop with our energy and resources this calculation to solve this mathematical problem. So essentially, the instrumental objectives that happen within that we cannot control, because we do not control the process of the instrumental objectives within deep learning, could be problematic in the way we develop it. So my answer to you is that I agree with you that theoretically that should be the goal, but it is no more than good intentions and wills saying that, because everybody knows that it won't happen. And I think that it is more of a political discourse. But what we should pressure for as humans is to have at least digital constitutionalism as a tool to fight against the unprecedented risk that this represents, and have at least some basic rights not to be confronted by AI. And the other big problem is about how human manipulation happens. So I think that there should be, at least in my opinion, there should be randomized deliberations, because if not, what will happen is that targeted people will be manipulated, such as in the Cambridge Analytica scandal or the other political scandals where AI has been involved. So I think that there should be a high level of independence and opacity in the way these people are, not opacity in the way they are selected, but opacity in the way they work. Because if people can be targeted, then it will be really hard to regulate this topic.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much.
Good question. Does anyone has any other question for Juan Diego? Nico, you can go ahead.
Well, if no one has like any more questions, then I can ask another question I'll always have. So another of the things that stood out to me, like with AI, you know, I remember seeing a LinkedIn post about somebody asking, I don't know which AI it was, but like they asked, show me a picture of a very beautiful woman, or like the most beautiful woman, something like that. And then AI portrayed like a white, blonde, blue-eyed woman. So basically what they said in the post is that like we gotta be very careful of the biases that are naturally built into the AI with like the information that's available. Does it make any sense from a regulatory standpoint of view to impose regulations on data that is used to process AI models?
So I think that the focus now on the regulation should also focus on the data sets that are being acquired, because the data sets that are being acquired are what determines how the AI is being trained. The models are basically done by other AI. So the way it is being, like, models are being shaped is by other artificial intelligence. So there's an AI who is a teacher, and then there's an AI who learns. And the AI who is a teacher basically designs the model for the one who learns and chooses from the pool of millions of AIs who learn the best one. So essentially, I feel that the problem is not in the model itself, though the model could be biased itself. Like what we're talking here is bias. So it could be a gender bias, or like, for instance, there's tons of categories, but basically the suspicious categories biases that happen within the law. And what I feel there is that you're right. And for instance, it also said, like, for instance, show me an image of a doctor, and it showed a male doctor most of the times. So because the training of the data sets are usually biased. And in that sense, we should ensure that at least the data sets that are being used are unbiased. And then if they are biased, seek corrective measures to make sure that the representative sample of the population is inside the dataset, and the dataset is sufficiently diversified, so we ensure that in that way AI works. I think that there's tons of human rights issues in this sense, but I did not go deep into them because it's what most people go into. So I feel that that discourse is very is like usually already taken, and I prefer to talk about other regulatory strategies, especially because human rights seem to be, in Latin America at least, a very inefficient way of regulating, since governments usually step over them. So I feel that constitutional law is much more stricter in these countries, in my opinion, at least from an Ecuadorian perspective, especially because I cannot also talk about all of Latin America, but that's what I feel in general terms.
Great. I see now that Mateo, you have another question.
Yeah, thank you so much. So this might be a more speculative question, but say you come up with a regulation and that it's accepted worldwide and whatnot. How do you enforce that the AI accepts or respects the regulation? This might be more of a technical detail, but wouldn't it be easy for the AI just to say, I don't care, I did not set up this regulation? Right.
I agree with you in the sense that regulation does not mean enforceability, in the sense that you can make the most perfect law, and you can, like, a good example is Latin America, where we have great laws, but some of them are never applied, and if they are applied poorly. So the ensurement of how regulation is being enforced is done through many rule of law mechanisms. So for instance, the way you could do it is when you are developing AI, if in the model of AI it's showing bias, for instance, you could stop that development of AI for the company to have to check it. So for instance, the way ambiental law works, for instance, in Ecuador, you have this principle of precaution. So whenever you cannot scientifically prove that precaution, that your activity will not contaminate the area in a large proportion, then you cannot deploy that activity, at least in Ecuador. So in that way, if we have the principle of precaution in AI, if you cannot prove that your AI is complying with law and ethics, then that AI should not be deployed at all, and in the investigative part. And then when it's deployed, for instance, if ChatGPT is deployed and it has a political bias, for instance, I've seen this when it has an opinion on Donald Trump and then on Barack Obama, it works completely different. So if it has a bias, then we should have corrective measures which are enforced through judicial rulings. So for instance, in data protection, you can de-index people from Google Scholar, and then you can correct the models by fine-tuning the AI models. So for instance, you can fine-tune it to understand context and to understand certain things that it does not understand now. And I feel that in that sense, the judge could order a fine-tuning in the sense that AI should have a more representative population of that which is underrepresented in the bias. So there's several ways in which the enforcement could happen, but I feel that the judicial way is too slow. And then I feel that at least you should have certain self-applicable guarantees, which is what I'm aiming for in my research, which should be constitutional. So you should be able to write to the company and tell them to de-index your information if the information is wrong, in the case of, for instance, Donald J. Trump or Barack Obama or whoever is the individual who the AI is talking about. And then you should also have the right to have a fine-tuning over the AI model and what the AI model is showing you to make your decision making. So I feel that it takes a lot of technical knowledge, but I feel that it should be available for the public user in a simple manner. But I feel that self-regulation, at least for me, is clear, is not the way towards regulating AI, because we have seen that it doesn't work. Sorry for the very long answer.
No, that was a great answer, but that works. So the fine-tuning works mostly for shallow AI, right? How
Yes.
would you fine-tune a deep AI model?
The problem is that it does not exist yet. So like we cannot, like it would be highly speculative. Yes, like if you want, I can throw a highly speculative answer, but AGI or superintelligence is not yet here. So we cannot know exactly how to work with it, basically. But in general terms, what you could do is reprimand certain actions as you do with human beings. Like for instance, how you show children how to behave themselves. So we would have like a lot of things to do on the way AI is learning. So what I would suggest there is first to have for us to have a clear ethical framework, which at least at the moment we don't have, on how we want AI to behave, and then use the regulatory instruments we have at the moment. So for instance, fine-tuning is one, but then for instance, there's also retraining, or for instance, you can train with another data set or corrective data sets. There's like a ton of options, but at least in that side, I'm not the expert, because it's like a very technical side. So computer scientists and like programming experts should be the ones to come up with these creative solutions. So I do feel that in the conversation, there should be more than only lawyers involved, and that's what interdisciplinary backgrounds bring to the conversation. So that's like what I would vouch for.
Yeah, fully agree. Thank you so much.
Nice, amazing. I don't know if anyone has any other question for Juan Diego. If not, then I will just say, first of all, once again, thanks a lot, Juan Diego, for sharing your experience and everything on the presentation with us today. Second is that we are creating a WhatsApp group for the people that are enthusiasts in AI, for people like Juan Diego. There are some researchers and people that are building some amazing stuff in this group. So in case that you want to stay tuned to know more about the next talk that we will have, yeah, you might want to join. And yeah, so once again, Juan Diego, really thanks a lot for your time today. It was an amazing session, and well, have an amazing afternoon, everyone.
Thank you so much.
See you. Bye.